brand new hour starts with breaking news. President Trump making a surprise trip to Afghanistan to celebrate Thanksgiving with U.S. troops away from their families this holiday. Hello again. I'm Rick Leventhal at Fox News World Headquarters in New York.
I'm Julie Banderas. Happy Thanksgiving to you, and thanks for sticking with us. So the president saying that there is nowhere he would rather spend Thanksgiving than with some of our country's toughest warriors. And he announced the U.S. has resumed peace talks with the Taliban.
More on this. Let's bring in Michael Szanto, an economist who focuses on international relations. Michael, thanks for being with us.
You're very welcome.
Your reaction to the resumption of peace talks with the enemy in America's longest war?
I mean, I think it's actually a good move in terms of, obviously, their enemy because of their role in 9/11 and other terror attacks. But I have to emphasize those terror attacks were largely orchestrated by Arab groups like al-Qaeda, and we have an ongoing problem with ISIS, which has a heavy Arab component. The Taliban harbored al-Qaeda. So I think I always felt like the core of the issue actually really was in the Arab world, and that's a complex issue. Yeah. So I think that we have to focus in on counterterrorism as one of our key priorities.
What is the likelihood of reaching a deal and the likelihood of the Taliban sticking to a deal if reached?
They do have extreme religious beliefs, and they're not the most reliable partners in discussing. But I would distinguish them with other groups that they've allied with in the past that are hardcore terrorists that are targeting the United States and want to see our destruction. So because Afghanistan is a very large, unwieldy country, it's not a bad idea to negotiate with them, but not in a way that would question our ability to stick with our allies in Afghanistan or around the world.
Well, Michael, I think if we've learned anything, it's that the Taliban can't be trusted. And how do you punish them if they don't hold up their end of the bargain?
Our military is by far the most powerful military in the world, whether it's F-16s, F-35, or cruise missiles. We can hit them very, very hard, and we can hit terrorists anywhere in the world, in fact. But I do have to emphasize a strategic issue that's a cause of a great deal of concern for me. Counterintuitively, our military is very overstrained. People always hear our military budget is so large and assume that we have enough resources. It's overstrained, and we're facing serious threats to the United States, our allies, and global interests. So we have to be very careful here. And that's why I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to negotiate with the Taliban. But, you know, as far as, you know, other terrorist groups, we need to destroy them. But I'm just not certain that the Taliban needs to be the focus of our limited military resources.
This also gets complicated, as I'm sure you know, Michael, because of the poppy industry. #1 crop in Afghanistan, from what I understand. Obviously, it's the key ingredient in heroin, and the Taliban has been using this for decades to line their pockets. The logic has been that you can't destroy those poppy crops because then you wind up doing the severe harm to the local farmers who have no choice but to grow the poppies, or the Taliban comes after them and their families. So if you wipe out the poppy crop, then you hurt the locals, and you need the local support for the troops. But in the meantime, the Taliban is fueling a drug industry. And how do you handle that piece of this puzzle?
Well, that's part of a global picture, by the way. You know, terrorists like even Hezbollah have used drug shipments throughout the world. But obviously, Afghanistan is a major source of the heroin industry. And you're exactly right. In order to win a counterinsurgency, we need to deal with economics, and we do need to try to give them a better livelihood. But the link between the global drug trade and terrorists and organized crime is not just limited to the Taliban. And that's a struggle. And, you know, our mistake after the Soviet Union pulled out was to let Afghanistan, whatever happened, happen, and allow the Taliban to take over in the first place. So we should not disengage from Afghanistan. I just don't necessarily think that the Taliban is the core of terrorist or national security threats at this time. But if they mess with the United States, they need to understand that we will be able to destroy their forces anywhere in Afghanistan or around the world.
But does that have to be part of the threat? If you don't cooperate with us, we're going to wipe out your bread and butter. And should we be doing it anyway?
I mean, it's part of our toolbox that we use in national security. But there are bigger threats out there, not just Iran, but the Russians have moved nuclear weapons, probably in Kaliningrad, in the middle of Europe. So we're dealing with a lot of threats globally. Everyone hears that our military budget is greater than the rest of the world combined, but we also have the world's largest economy. We're the main guarantor of the global order, and our military is in fact overstrained. You see this in cases with ships colliding, partly because our military is overstrained. We might actually counterintuitively have to increase our military budget, if anything, because we are the global superpower. But yes, if you're dealing with players that are not entirely good, in some cases just bad, the threat of the use of military forces is important. Any restructuring of or deployment of forces has to be done in a thoughtful manner that's done with a good strategy so that we're able to move forces back into the places we need to. But my general take on our war against terrorism, which Taliban was a part of, is they're not necessarily central to this. We got bin Laden kicked out of Sudan in the late 90s. He went back to Afghanistan, not necessarily happily. Mullah Omar liked him, but I'm not sure that the Taliban is monolithically against the United States. That's why we have threats globally, and we can't necessarily have huge military presences everywhere the terrorists could move into.
Michael, we got to wrap this up, but I don't know if you can do a yes or no, but do you think there will be quickly a deal made here with the Taliban?
I think there's the potential for sure, and thank you to our troops who serve our country.
All right, Michael Szanto, economist and international expert. We appreciate your time today.